Good morning, crime community. I'm here to continue to read out Edgar Allan Poe. This is the conclusion of How to Write a Blackwood Article. And then there was the diary of a late physician where the merit lay in good rant and indifferent Greek, both of them taking things with the public. And then there was The Man in the Bell, a paper, by the way, Miss Zenobia, which I cannot sufficiently recommend to your attention. It is in the history of a young person who goes to sleep under the clapper of the church bell and is awakened by the tolling for the funeral. The sounds drive him mad, and accordingly, pulling out the tablets, he gives a record of the sensations. Sensations are a great thing after all. Should you ever be drowned or hung, be sure and make a note of your sensations, and they will be worth to you 10 guineas a sheet. If you wish to write forcibly, Miss Zenobia may pay attention to the sensations. That I certainly will, Mr. Blackwood, said I. Good, he replied. I see you are a pupil after my own heart. I must put you a fault to the details necessary in composing what may be demonstrated as genuine Blackwood article of the sensation stamp, the kind of which you will understand me to say that I consider the best of all purposes. The first thing requisite is to get yourself into such a scrape as that no one ever got into before. The oven, for instance, was a good hit, but if you have no oven or big bell at hand, if you cannot conveniently tumble out of a balloon or be swallowed up in an earthquake or get stuck fast in a chimney, you will have to connect by simply imagining some similar misadventure. I should prefer, however, that you have the actual fact to bear you out. Nothing so will assist the fantasy as an experimental knowledge of the matter at hand. Truth is strange, you know, stranger than fiction, besides being more to the purpose. Here I assured him that I had an excellent pair of garters and would go and hang myself forthwith. Good, he replied, do so, although hanging is a somewhat hackneyed. Perhaps you might do better, take a dose of Brandis pills and give us your sensations. However, my instructions will apply equally well to a variety of misadventure, and in way your home you may easily get knocked in the head or run over by an omnibus or bitten by a mad dog or drowned in the gutter. But to proceed, having determined upon your subject, you must next consider the tone, the manner, and your narration. There is the tone didactic, the tone enthusiastic, the tone natural, all commonplace enough. But then there is the tone iconic or curt, which has lately come much into use. It consists of short sentences, somehow thus. Can't be too brief, can't be too snappish, always a full stop, and never a paragraph. And then there is the tone elevated, diffuse, and interjectional. Some of our best novelists patronize this tone. The words must be all in a whirl, like a humming top, and make a noise very similar, which answers remarkably well instead of meaning. This is the best of all possible styles where the writer is too great a hurry to think. The tone metaphysical is also a good one. If you know any big words, that is your chance for them. Talk of the iconic and eclectic schools of Archytas, Georgius, and Almaeon. Say something about objectivity and subjectivity. Be sure and abuse a man named Locke. Turn up your nose at things in general, and then you let slip anything a little too absurd. You need not be in the trouble of scratching it out or just add a little footnote and say that you're indebted for the above profound observation of the Carrique de Referendum Verdant or the Metaphysique der Naturalist. You will look erudite and frank. There are various other tones of equal celebrity, and I shall mention only two more, the tone transcendental and the tone heterogeneous. In the former, the merit consists of seeing into the nature of affairs a very great deal farther than anybody else. This second side is very efficient and properly managed. A little reading of the dial will carry you a great way. Eschew, in this case, big words, get them as small as possible, and write them upside down. Look over the Channing poems and quote, and you will say about a fat little man with a delusive show of can. But in something about the supernatural oneness, don't say a syllable about the internal two-ness. Above all, study innuendo. hint everything, assert nothing. If you feel inclined to say bread and butter, do not say any meaning, say it outright. You may say anything and everything approaching to bread and butter. You may hint at buckwheat cake, or you may even go far as to insinuate oatmeal porridge. But if bread and butter is your real meaning, be cautious, my dear Miss Psyche. Not only on account to say bread and butter, I assure him that I should never say it again as long as I lived. He kissed me and continued, as far as the tone heterogeneous, it is merely a judicious mixture and equal proportions of all the other tones in the world, and is consequently made up of everything deep, great, odd, but quaint, pertinent, and pretty. Let us suppose now that we have determined upon your incidents and tones, the most important portion, in fact, the soul of the whole business, is yet to be attended to. I allude to the filling up, and it is not to be supposed that a lady or gentleman either has been leading the life of a bookworm, and yet above all things it is necessary that your article have an air of erudition, or at least afford evidence of extensive general reading. Now I'll put you in a way of accomplishing this point. See here, pulling down some of 3 or 4 ordinary looking volumes and opening them at random. By casting your eye down almost any page of the book in the world, you'll be able to perceive at once a host of little scraps of either learning or spiritism, which are the very thing of the spicing of the Blackwood article. You might as well note down a few while I read them to you. I shall make 2 divisions. First, quaint facts for the manufacture of similes, and second, quaint expressions to be introduced as occasion may require. Write now, and I wrote as he dictated, quaint facts for similes. There are originally but 3 muses, Melit, Memne, and Aside, meditation, memory, and singing. You may make a good deal of the little fact if properly worked. You see it if not generally known, it looks recherche. You must be careful and give the thing with a downright improvisio air. Again, the river Alpheus passed beneath the sea and emerged without injury to the purity of the waters. Rather stale that, to be sure, but if properly dressed and dished up, will look quite as fresh as ever. Here is something better. The Parisian iris appears to be persons to possess a sweet and very powerful perfume, while to others it is perfectly scentless. Find that and very delicate. Turn it about a little and it will do wonders. We'll have something else in the botanical line. There is nothing that goes down as so well, especially with the help of a little Latin. Right. The Asphidium Floris aeris of Java bears a very beautiful flower and will live when pulled up by the roots. The natives suspend it a cord from the ceiling and enjoy its fragrances for years. That's capital. What we'll do with the similes? Now for the piquant expressions. Piquant expressions. The venerable Chinese novel Ju Kao Li, good. By introducing these few words and dexterity, you will evince your intimate acquaintances with the language and literature of the Chinese. With the aid of this, you may possibly get along without either Arabic or Sanskrit or Chickasaw. There is no passing muster, however, without Spanish, Italian, German, Latin, and Greek. I must look you out a little specimen of each. Any scrap will answer because you must depend upon your own ingenuity. Make it fit into your article. Now write. Assez tendere que zere as tender azer. French alludes to the frequent repetition of the phrase la tendre zere in the French tragedy of the name. Properly introduced will show not only your knowledge of the language, but your general reading and wit. You can say, for instance, that the chicken you were eating, writing an article about being choked to death by a chicken bone, was not altogether assez tendre que zere. Right. Vere moste ton escondida que no sienta vetir. Porque el placer del morir no me torne a ver la vida. That's Spanish for Magul de Cervantes. Come quickly, O death, but be sure and don't let me see you coming, lest the pleasure I shall feel at your appearance should unfortunately bring me back again to life. This, you may slip, is, quote, a propos when you are struggling in the last agonies of the chicken bone writes, Il provo humono che non sen es accordo avante conabato era moto. That's Italian. You perceive from Drosio, it means that a great hero in the heat of combat, not perceiving that he had been fairly killed, continued to fight valiantly, dead as he was. The application of this to your own case is obvious, for I trust, Miss Psyche, that you will not neglect or kick for at least an hour and a half after you have been choked to death by the chicken bone. Please to write. Ut start in dich as there in dem duce si. That's German from Schiller. And if I die, at least I die for these, for thee. Here it is clear that you are apostrophizing the cause of your disaster, the chicken. Indeed, the gentleman or lady either of sense wouldn't die. I should like to know, for a well-faltered caption of the right Molucca breed, stuffed with capers and mushrooms and served up in a salad bowl with orange jellies and mollusks, right. You can now get them way at Tortoni's, right, if you please. Here is a nice little Latin phrase, and rare too. One can't be too ricere or brief in one Latin. It's getting so common, ignorato elenchi. He has committed an ignorato elenchi, that is to say, he has understood the words of your proposition, but not the ideas. The man was a fool, you see, some poor fellow whom you addressed while choking with that chicken bone, and who therefore didn't precisely understand what you were talking about, know the ignorato elenchi of his teeth, and at once you have him annihilated. And he dares to reply, and you can tell him from Lucian, here it is, the speeches and are mere anemone verbatim, anemone words. The amone, which great brilliancy has no smell, or at the beginning to blister, you may be down from him with the insomnia Jovis reveries of Jupiter, a phrase which Silius Italicus, see here, applies to thoughts and pompous and inflated. This will be sure and cut him to the heart. He can do anything but roll over and die. You will be kind enough to write. In Greek, we must have something pretty from Dionysius, for example, Anephew Vevorexium, Anger e Penguin Calpalin Massacetil. This is a totally good tradition of it, is Hadibras. For he that flies may fight again, which he can never do, that's slain. In a Blackwood article, nothing makes so fine a show as your Greek. The very letters have an air of profundity about them. Only observe Madame and astute look of the epsilon. The phi ought certainly to be a bishop. Was there ever a smarter fellow than that Omicron? Just twig the tau. In short, there is nothing like Greek in the genuine sensation paper. In the present case of your application is the most obvious thing in the world. Wrap out the sentence with a Hugh oath, and by way of ultimatum, as the good-for-nothing, dunder-headed villain who couldn't understand your plain English in relation to the chicken bone, he'll take the hint and be off. You may depend upon it. This is where all the introductions Mr. B could afford me upon the topic in question, and I felt they would be entirely sufficient. I was at length able to write a genuine Blackwood article and determined to do it forthwith. In taking leave of me, Mr. B made a proposition for the purchase of a paper when written, but as he could offer me only 50 guineas a sheet, I thought it better to let our society have it than sacrifice it for so paltry a sum. Notwithstanding this niggardly spirit, however, the gentleman showed his consideration for me in all other respects, and indeed trusted me with the greatest civility. His parting words made a deep impression upon my heart, and I hope I shall always remember them with gratitude. My dear Miss Zenobia, he said, while the tears stood in his eyes, is there anything else I can do to promote the success of the laudable undertaking? Let me reflect. It is just possible that you may not be able, so soon as convenient, to get yourself drowned, or choked with a chicken bone, or hung, or bitten. But stay. But now, there is a couple of very excellent bulldogs in the yard. Fine fellows, I assure you, savage and all that, indeed. And the thing for your money, you'll have you eaten up auriculus and all, and in less than 5 minutes, here's my watch, and then only think of you sensations. Here, I say, Tom, Peter, Dick, you villain, let out those. But I was really in a great hurry, and I had no other moment to spare. I was reluctantly forced to expedite my departure, and accordingly took leave at once, somewhat more abruptly, I admit, than strictly courtesy would have otherwise allowed. It was my primary object, upon quitting Mr. Blackwood, to get into some immediate difficulty, pursuant to his advice, and with this view I spent the greater part of the day in wandering about Edinburgh, seeking for desperate adventures adequate to the intensity of my feelings and adapt to the vast character of the article I intended to write. In this excursion, I was attended to my Negro servant, Pompey, and my little lapdog, Diana, who I had brought with me from Philadelphia. It was not, however, until late in the afternoon that I fully succeeded in my arduous undertaking. An important event that happened, of which the following Blackwood article in the tongue heterogeneous of the substance and result. That is the end of how to write a Blackwood article, which brings us to another lesson for today. I'm going to read one more poem by Emily Bronte. Let's see, where did I leave off with Emily? It's called The Imagination. The print is so small, it's really hard to believe. I don't know if I use a magnifying glass or what. When weary with the long day's care and earthly change from pain to pain, and lost and ready to despair, the kind voice calls me back again. O my true friend, I am not lone, which thou canst speak with such a tone. So hopeless in the world without, the world within I doubtly prize. The world while guile and hate and doubt and cold suspicion never rise. Where thou and I in liberty have undisputed sovereignty, what matters it that all around danger and guilt and darkness lie, if but within our bosom bound we hold a bright, untroubled sky, worn with 10,000 mingled rays, and suns and no winter days. Reason indeed may oft complain for nature's sad reality, and telling the suffering heart how vain its cherished dreams may always be, and truth may rudely trample down the flowers of fancy newly blown. But there art ever there to bring the hovering vision back, and breathe new glories o'er the blighted spring, and call a lovelier life from death, and whisper with a voice divine of real worlds as bright as thine. I trust not to thy phantom bliss, yet still an evening's quiet hour, with never failing thankfulness, I welcome thee, benign power, so sure solacer of human cares, and sweeter hope than hope despairs. That's the end of Emily Bronte's poem. We will leave Poe for another day. I don't know where I'm going in with Poe at this point. I'm in volume 3. I don't know what will be next. But like and share, subscribe, and have a nice day.